increasing your enrichment schedule and your physical activity schedule. So making sure that you are mentally stimulating them when you are home and physically stimulating them when you are home as well. And often that's best if you set a very stable routine that your dog can predict. So getting up at the same time in the morning, feeding at the same time, doing your walk at the same time, doing your playtime at the same time. The more predictable that the routine is, the more the dog will slide into that and feel a lot more secure and comfortable with it too.
The voice you've just been listening to belongs to Sara Ondrako. Now, not only is she a canine behaviour consultant whose goal is to help owners and others to speak dog, to reach their goals and create a safer environment for both animals and their human companions. She's also a veterinary nurse. She's a founder of a hugely important non-profit. And she's speaking with me today to break down the mystery of separation anxiety. This is a really common problem that a lot of people are suffering from, or a lot of dogs are suffering from as a result of the lockdown situation and the change in routine that we've been suffering from, and as a result that they have been subjected to. But not only does Sara really eloquently and clearly break down the facts about what separation anxiety is and why it develops, she also gives really clear actionable steps that you can take to cure your dog or to help your dog who is suffering from separation anxiety, but just as importantly, to stop them from developing this potentially debilitating and damaging condition in the first place. So let's jump into today's episode.
Welcome to the Call the Vet Show, the podcast that helps keep your furry family as healthy as possible so they can live the full and happy life they deserve. And here's your host, veterinarian Dr. Alex Avery.
Hello, and welcome to episode 69 of the Call the Vet Show. So I hope you're well. I hope you're staying safe. I'm back from my holiday. Last week was an episode that I'd recorded a little while ago, and that was actually scheduled for this week. But I've been doing some thinking while I was on my month's break. That's kind of break from Our Pet's Health and Call the Vet and that kind of thing. I was still working as normal, although I did manage a week away with the family. But I've been thinking during this time, and I'm going to mix things up with the podcast. So I really enjoy receiving your questions, and I've actually got some fantastic voicemail questions that have been left that will be coming up in the next few weeks. But I also really want to help to share the expertise of other people. And so I'm going to be answering your questions with interviewing other experts in their fields. And we're starting with a really important topic today, and that is separation anxiety. It's a problem that I've actually been seeing quite a bit more than normal over the last few weeks. Lockdown has lifted here in New Zealand. We've been very fortunate from that point of view, but it means that dogs that have got used to having you, their owner, with them in their environment, paying them attention, showing them your affection, they've had that for an awful lot more than they normally would. And now life is getting back to normal, they're struggling to cope. So without further ado, let's get into my interview with Sara. Sara, welcome to the show. I'm really happy to have you along, and I'm really excited for our conversation because I know you're going to bring some fantastic expertise to a really common problem, or a problem that's really developing in the time that we're living in. But before we jump into that, I wondered if you just wanted to introduce yourself and let everybody know how you came interested in canine behaviour and what led you down that path.
Certainly, I'd be happy to. Thanks so much for having me. First off, I'm really excited about our conversation and collaboration from two different angles of the animal field, so to speak. I am a canine behavior consultant, and I actually came into this profession by happenstance. I began running a nonprofit organization a little over 10 years ago, and one of the main problems that I faced in trying to prevent shelter overpopulation and euthanasia through this organization was behavioral issues. People were surrendering their pets or having their pets euthanized because they didn't know how to effectively communicate with their animals and solve some of these behavioral problems that they were seeing. And so I took a keen interest in that. I'm also a veterinary nurse that have been on and off for over 20 years, and I did a lot of continuing education with behavior and surgery. That was fun too. But I used a lot of that knowledge that I gained through my paying job to help in my volunteer work. And so I worked with innumerable amount of owners that were facing behavioral issues to work through those problems with them to avoid surrender euthanasia. So kind of by happenstance, fast forward, several years down the road, I started taking on private cases and helping other veterinarians in the field, veterinary technicians in the field as well, and seeing private clients from there. It was just something that I, again, kind of fell into and really, really enjoyed. So kept going with the momentum. And when it comes to behavior, I can't take in enough knowledge. So I'm a sucker for as much knowledge as possible. And that just kind of fits really well with the advancement of the field. So
yeah. I mean, it's a field that really is developing quite a lot over the years. I mean, I think back to when I was in vet school 15 years or so ago, and a lot of it was just touched on. There wasn't a whole lot of emphasis on that, but the continuing education, certainly from a veterinarian point of view, there's a huge amount, and I'm learning all the time. And I admitted off air as well that it's not a topic that I am would consider myself a real expert in, which is why I was very pleased that you agreed to come and talk to us, because having that real expert insight is important, because it's very difficult. There's lots of kind of subtle nuances with behavior, isn't there, as well? So there's definitely not a one size fits all strategy that you can blanket treat every dog or every cat with the same condition.
Absolutely. It's very niche, and behavioral modification plans are very individualized. So it's very specific to each and every dog, even though we see similar problems and we solve them with similar tactics or different angles. Every single behavioral plan is really an individual plan.
Yeah. And it's really important as well, I think, that you kind of see the dog in their environment as well, which I guess, is something that even can still be done remotely, which a lot of it will be done at this time, I'd imagine, with Skype and Zoom and all that kind of thing, because seeing them in their environment is really, important to pick up subtle clues about why they're exhibiting certain behaviors.
Yeah, it definitely helps a lot. And I do see clients in clinic, but I can tell you there's a huge advantage to being in the environment. The majority of the clients that I work with, I do ask to come to their house if they're local. Even if they're, an hour or less, I'll still go out, because to actually watch the dog and observe them in their own environment and observe them interacting with their people, oftentimes I can pick up so much more information than what they're telling me, because most of the time, I shouldn't say most, a lot of the time, they don't actually know what they're looking for or what their dog is communicating. So it's misrepresented when they give me the story, so to speak. So to see it in person really helps immensely, just to be able to put my eyeballs on it directly.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the same, I imagine, as a vet nurse, you'd have seen that from a medical point of view as well, is that it's very difficult. People don't speak dog. And so it's difficult to pick up those subtle clues that they're in pain or they're drinking more or whatever. So yeah, it's a big jigsaw puzzle. I guess that brings us to kind of the main topic that I wanted to cover today, which is separation anxiety and separation related problems. So I'm certainly seeing a little bit of this in clinic, although our lockdown situation wasn't nearly as bad as a lot of other places in the world. We're very lucky here in New Zealand that, apart from borders being closed, where life is normal. But a lot of people have been spending a much greater time with their pet, or they've actually brought a new puppy or a new dog into their household at the start of lockdown because they anticipated this extra time they could spend bonding. But now that things are starting to lift, we're dealing with a whole load of behavioural issues as a result of that. And one thing that you kind of flagged at the very beginning is that there's separation anxiety and there's separation related problems, and they're not the same. So I wondered if you maybe wanted to discuss why they're not the same, why we can't just say separation anxiety is the blanket condition that these guys are all suffering from.
Absolutely. And I'm glad we're touching on this, because separation anxiety is used as a blanket term, and it's actually a very specific diagnosis. It's very specific to one person in general when it comes to a dog's separation-related problems. Separation-related problems, which is a much broader category, can be things like isolation problems. It can be problems related to being separated from other canines. It can be separation related from other people, but it's not specific to one individual human necessarily. So just to recap the difference, separation anxiety is specific to one person, whereas separation-related problems is more a fear of isolation in general. So being left alone, not being left alone from their person.
Okay.
So in breeds like Neapolitan Mastiff that really connect with one specific owner, and they're very attached to that one owner, especially if they don't come and go very often, that's a likely case where you'd see true separation anxiety. Whereas, you have American Pit Bull Terrier, they love everybody. Yeah. They might just not want to be left alone. And that's an isolation or a separation related problem. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, and do those diseases or those behavioral issues manifest differently, or are they showing quite similar outward signs to somebody who's not, trained to look and see what the difference is?
There are quite a few similar signs for sure. For example, you'll see some of the same frustrating behaviors, perhaps, inappropriate urination and defecation in the home, being very destructive or chewing things in the home as well, whining, crying, barking, panting, pacing. These are all common symptoms and signs that you'll see in both of these issues. For sure. Yeah. So it can often be difficult to diagnose specifically, but it does help to kind of nail it down so that you know how to approach it, whether it's just one specific person and situation that we have to build confidence with, or whether it's kind of everyone in the household.
Yeah.
It's certainly a little easier to work with an isolation problem, I think, that's more generalized than it is to one specific person, depending on the case, I guess. But yeah, you'll definitely see a lot of the same type symptoms and signs in both.
Yeah, and it can be a real spectrum, can't it? I've seen some, thankfully never in person, but some horrendous photos of dogs that have just tried to escape from their surroundings, and the carnage that they can do to their environment, but also the damage that they can do to themselves is pretty extreme at times. So it's not something to be thought of as a minor inconvenience to you as the owner. It's has a massive impact to the pet. And so why do these things develop in the first place? I mean, at the current stage, we're thinking, well, you're spending an awful lot of time with your pet, but it is a condition that can develop in normal life, if you like, as well. Is it just because they're so used to spending time with people or other animals in the sense of separation related problems, or certain a specific individual in the case of separation anxiety, and then that changes? Or is there other kind of things that we can think about that cause that to develop?
Oftentimes it really is a change in environment or different stressors that occur. Separation related problems are something that can manifest with various changes to people coming in and out of the house, a work schedule changing, and absolutely quarantine is one of those big things that has caused a lot of separation related problems, because not only do you have the initial change, which is a stressor, even if it's a good stress, it's still stress. So you have that initial stress of now all of my entire family is home and I'm here all the time and I don't have independent time anymore and I don't have to be by myself anymore. And they kind of lose that ability to entertain themselves or self-soothe if they're frightened, or recover from things that they're frightened from when they don't typically have their owners. So normal levels anyhow. Then you throw in a second change to where all of a sudden overnight they go back to work again and you've just disrupted their whole entire universe again. So not only is it one shift, but then it's two shifts within a small amount of time, and that can really throw their world off. And so that's where you'll start to see some of these frustrating behaviors from them. It's a lot easier for them to handle that or tolerate that if it's a gradual change. Yep. Anytime we're going to change something in the dog's environment, it's much easier for them if it's obviously a gradual change. It's easier for them to get used to. So yeah, that's certainly one of the reasons, is that all of a sudden people are home much more and the dog gets very used to that. And then all of a sudden they're gone again. And they're like, how do I cope on my own?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let me just alleviate this stress in any way that I know how. I don't know what to do with all this energy. I'm just going to,
Yeah. And I imagine it's going to be worse for maybe puppies in the current situation, because they've never had the situation where they've had to cope with that. Whereas maybe an older dog who was okay, but is now kind of showing some signs of a separation related problem, it may be that they're showing more minor signs and more subtle signs, but they're still stressed and they're still struggling, but maybe not to quite a degree as the puppies are. So that's great. And I'm sure that there are going to be people who go, well, actually, now that you think of it, and my dog is pacing, maybe they've had a couple of accidents, maybe, they are dealing with a separation anxiety or separation related problem. What can they do about that? How can they go about helping their dog to adjust to their new situation that they find themselves in?
Well, like you brought up, there's two different cases. So you have the younger puppies that are going through their super sponge, stages and critical development periods. It's a bit different than the adult dogs that do have some of that muscle memory of what it was once like to cope and what it's like to be on my own, or just with my other pet members in the household. There are a number of different things that we can throw at separation related problems. And oftentimes it starts with, the hardest part is really trying not to be gone from the home until you can work through this. And it's an undetermined amount of time. So people are like, I can't just be home for an undetermined amount of time. But having somebody, if it's not true separation anxiety, if it is an isolation issue and it's not that one person, having other people that can help, other family members that can help, a pet sitter that can help, friends, family, whatever it is, that might be able to take the place of you when you're not there until you can get your dog back on a normal routine, a normal track. Unfortunately, with separation related problems, a small setback is much bigger than we perceive. even if they're like, oh, well, they only got out once and defecated once, or, chewed one shoe while I was gone within the week. It's more of a major setback for the dog than it is for the people as far as perception is concerned. So if you can, your best bet is to have the animal not alone just during that transition period when you're working on a behavior modification plan to get them out of that. Increasing your enrichment schedule and your physical activity schedule. So making sure that you are mentally stimulating them when you are home and physically stimulating them when you are home as well. And often that's best if you set a very stable routine that your dog can predict. So getting up at the same time in the morning, feeding at the same time, doing your walk at the same time, doing your playtime at the same time. The more predictable that the routine is, the more the dog will slide into that and feel a lot more secure and comfortable with it too. There can be some medical intervention, as you know. I always refer all of that out to my veterinarians. Obviously, I don't ever make any medical recommendations whatsoever. That's not my field. However, I do often recommend for any dog that's experiencing signs of fear and anxiety, especially in separation-related cases, to do a nutrition check. Make sure that we are on highly digestible proteins, because the gut and the brain are directly connected. They communicate all sorts of stuff to one another without getting into too much scientific detail. So doing a nutrition check to make sure they're on, a good quality nutritional diet and potentially a full spectrum probiotic supplement, looking at doing a probiotic supplement like Calming Care, that Purina has. Some places it's over the counter, some countries it requires a prescription via veterinarians, but Bifidobacteria longum is the specific strain in that product, and some over-the-counter products that really help kind of balance the gut, especially in animals that experience really high levels of anxiety or fear. So just a few things you can do. Definitely mental and physical stimulation, setting that routine, supporting them nutritionally, and also what's really important is keeping that energy level down when you're coming in the house and when you're leaving the house. So not coming in and being like, oh, Flippy, what's up? I've been gone all day. It's so good to see you. And you're like, whoa, just keeping that calm. Hey, buddy, how's it going? And going about your routine and keeping that energy level down. Because if you have a lot of energy coming and going, you're going to add to that energy when you're gone, and they're just going to ruminate over that, fixate on that, and make it worse for themselves when you're not there.
Yeah. So I've one thing, and just you mentioning that, it kind of brings it to my mind again, is that dogs, they'll pick up triggers as well when you're about to leave. So you're hunting the house for your keys and your wallet and your phone and everything else, and actually if you make it much more low key, so you kind of grab everything and go, that's going to be a little bit better than from what you say, rather than having a whole rigmarole of spending 30 minutes getting ready to go and your dog being wound up for that whole time and getting worse and worse. Yeah.
The interesting thing though is that oftentimes people aren't picking up on what the actual departure cues are.
No.
So for some people are like, oh, it's when I grab my keys. No, it's actually when you scoop the food 10 minutes ago, put it in the bowl. The dog has a recognized pattern of everything that happens right before you exit. So You're right. Working on desensitizing to some of those departure cues, even if you don't think they're a big deal, just every part of that process can help bring that energy level down when you leave.
Cool. And in terms of accessories, I guess for mental stimulation, I mean, things that I think of are Kongs, slow feeders, licky mats, food puzzles, snuffle pads, all those kinds of things. Obviously, making sure that your dog's not chewing them to pieces in the first case, and that they're gentle chewers or whatever, and making sure that they're not swallowing big bits of toys as well. But those are all great for mental stimulation. Are there any other? So we kind of, when I think of other fear-related problems, there's like the body wraps, and the name of them escapes me, the thunder shirts, I think it is. Yeah. Do those kinds of things help play a role as well, or is that just they're completely separate problems, so they're not going to help in this situation?
I don't find that they help that much at all in this type of situation. Those are more event specific. Yeah. So, noise related, pressure change related, things like that. I haven't seen a lot of success with something like a thunder shirt used for separation anxiety or separation related problems as of yet. However, I'm up for trying anything. Like if you put it on the dog and you think it makes a difference, go for it.
Yeah. And I guess maybe
every dog is individual.
Yeah, and maybe if you're using it for another reason and it helps, then maybe you can just use it, put it on and things. And I guess
we know that there's an association with comfort for sure. Like dogs that we muzzle, we know that building a positive association with a muzzle can just alleviate stress in general, because it really likes to have the muzzle on. So the same could be for a thunder shirt as well. I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you mentioned kind of supplements and medications and things like that, and there's definitely a role with those, and there's a number of those in our toolkit, and they'll be dispensed based on individual history and health and all that kind of thing. But one thing that I'm very cognizant of as a vet is that drugs aren't the solution to the problem. They can help manage it. They can help a dog maybe cope in the short term, but we don't want to rely on them as saying, well, I'm giving X, Y, or Z drug, they seem to be calmer, so I don't need to do anything else. So I always stress, we are very lucky that we do have a behaviorist kind of about an hour and a half away who does travel, so can come and see my clients. But yeah, I always stress that to my patients, that really drugs aren't the answer. They might help in the short term, but it's so important that you work through all of those things that you've just said. So that's great. So hopefully, I mean, that's going to sort things out for them. Obviously, if people are struggling, then they need to consult with a behaviorist. So, people like yourself who are doing them online when you can't travel are great, but seeing a local behaviorist is important. If they can come to your house, that makes a huge difference. If you're enjoying this episode of the podcast, I'd invite you to check out ourpetshealthacademy.com. The Our Pets Health Academy is the essential resource for any pet parent who is truly serious about keeping their furry family member as happy, healthy, and comfortable as possible. Whether you've just brought a new puppy or kitten into the home, or you've had pets all your life, the Our Pets Health Academy will help you eliminate uncertainty and guide you through difficult situations, while also saving you time and money so that you can optimize your dog and cat's health. With our growing course list, monthly live training and Q&A sessions, resource library, discounts and member-only forum, the Academy will give you everything you need to look after your pet to the best of your ability. Check it out at ourpetshealthacademy.com. But hopefully we can avoid this problem in the first place. And I guess I'm a big believer in prevention is much better than cure, certainly from behavioural problems.
Yeah.
It's a long old process, isn't it? Like you say, the time is indeterminate. For some it will be short, for some it will be a really long-term effort that you never get a full handle on, and you just help to cope with general behaviours. So if people are finding themselves in a lockdown situation, or they're thinking about bringing a puppy into their house, how can they prevent this from ever rearing its head? Because that's got to be the main goal if we can absolutely get there.
Absolutely. And the general answer to that is by providing all of the puppy's needs. So it's not as simple as it sounds, obviously, but looking at things like we were talking about before, tackling things like their enrichment schedule, their daily one-on-one time. Oftentimes I'm like, okay, what do you do that's enriching with your dog? Oh, I have a big backyard. I send him outside and he goes and runs and plays. Well, we've domesticated animals to be our companions, and they thrive off of that. They're very eager to please animals. So making sure that they have adequate one-on-one time, at least 30 minutes twice a day, morning and evening, when they have those 2 waves of periods of energy and their second wind, so to speak. So enrichment, physical activity for sure, building in really good parental direction early on, setting routines. And then also that other piece to that is building in independent time. So teaching that puppy when it's time to settle and when it's time to independently play. And like you had mentioned before, we can do that with puzzle toys, frozen Kongs, with crate time. Also, something that people don't think about is even if you're home, put your puppy in the crate for rest periods, for nap periods. Not only does it help them retain information that they've learned throughout the day in training with latent learning, but also it teaches them that independent rest time, and they become very comfortable with that. And that's what you want. You want them to enjoy that separate time and then enjoy the time that they're with you when they are, but understanding those different periods. So building in everything that they need, obviously from nutrition and things like that too, but more importantly, activity-wise, schedule-wise with physical and mental activities, and then also building in that independent playtime for themselves.
Okay, cool. So yeah, crate training is a big thing, and I know it's something that a lot of people struggle with. So I mean, it's a whole different topic in itself, isn't it? But how do people? Because I think a lot of people, they bring a new puppy, they're so excited, they want to provide, the best that they can, all the attention in the world. The puppy goes in the crate, doesn't like it, lasts about 10 seconds, and then gets brought out and never goes back in. So yeah, how I mean, we used to say, I think my first boss used to say, well, when you get a puppy, go and give your neighbours a bottle of wine each, because there's going to be a period of time when they're barking, and so you get your apologies in ahead of time. But rather than just completely ignoring them, are there ways that they can or strategies that you found that work for your clients to maximise the chance of a successful transition to crate training?
Absolutely. Scheduling helps a lot with them. So knowing when they need to come out, like they need to go to the bathroom or they're hungry, there's a huge difference between distress and a temper tantrum. So just like we do with human kids, you know, if you allow the puppy to make every decision based off the tantrum that it has, you're setting yourself up for a spoiled, rotten individual that's potentially going to have some pretty bad behavioral problems down the road. Let me tell you, I'm much more expensive 5 years down the road than in the beginning. So prevention is key. And yes, you got to wait it out. Again, there's a difference between distress and a temper tantrum. And the sooner that you give into that puppy and teach them that that whining and fussing and complaining is going to get them their way, the harder it's going to be the next time around. Boundaries are really, really important. Parental guidance is really important. These little guys don't make the best decisions on their own. It's like leaving a toddler to choose what it's going to do and what it's not going to do. They don't make good decisions. You've got to do that for them. So sometimes you got to have some tough love and you got to stick it out, it's for the better. It's like kids that don't like to do their homework. Well, you have to, because I want you to be an intelligent contributor to society later on down the road, and you'll thank me for it. But right now you don't want to do it. You don't understand why I'm making you, but it's important. Same thing with puppies. Try to ignore the temper tantrum behavior. You'll learn to know the difference when your puppy really has to go out. There's a different sound to that, and you'll get familiarized with that. Okay to make a mistake every once in a while and slip up to where you're like, oops, I should have taken him out earlier. He went. Or you take him out and you realize that he just wants to run around and play. Nobody's expecting perfection. Just do the best that you can with that, but be very consistent with the crate. Setting a schedule based on how frequently the puppy goes out to potty, your play, your enrichment, your exercise, your downtime, all that stuff, and trying to make it predictable helps with crate training immensely, because then the puppy comes to learn and predict and understand when it's crate time. And that's a comfort all on its own. That predictability is really helpful in building a secure puppy and a confident puppy. So they like those schedules and those routines. So the best that you can schedule one for them, the better their behavioral will be balanced overall in learning how to crate train. And the added benefit to that is that it really speeds up the potty training process immensely. Makes it so much easier.
Yeah. I mean, routine is a bit of a buzzword, isn't it? It's great. We're all creatures of habit, and we all love routine. And we get stressed when things are all out of whack, and our dogs are the same. And the other thing I guess I often say to people is that dogs are very good at training us, because that whining or I don't want to, I'm going to refuse my food because I know that the good stuff's in the fridge and that's going to get brought out. And we've got to be mindful that we're not being trained and actually we're in charge of the situation. Perfect. So Sarah, that is some fantastic information. I've got all kinds of different things that I can be telling my clients now, and my brain is kind of overflowing. So I know that's going to help immensely with a lot of people that's going through a very difficult time. I mean, it's the last thing that we want when there's all kinds of upheaval in our lives, like we just said, routine. Having the stress of a dog who is hurting themselves or is destroying their environment has a massive impact on owners as well. So I know that's going to make a huge difference. So thank you so much for joining us today. Just before we go, where would you like to send people if they want to know more about you and the work that you do? And there's a whole load of other work that we haven't touched on, your non-profit with the American Pit Bull Foundation, and maybe there'll have to be a repeat show, because pit bulls are, they are a fantastic breed of dog that are very misunderstood. So where can people find out more about you and the fantastic work that you do?
Sure. So the best spot to go is just directly to my website, which is saraondrako.com, SARAONDRAKO.com. And the address to the nonprofit organization is apbf.dog. I also have a YouTube channel. It's just YouTube/Sara Ondrako, and you can catch me on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook as well.
Everywhere. Absolutely everywhere. Which is the life of an online entrepreneur and business person, isn't it? No, that's fantastic. And I'll leave all those links in the show notes and descriptions as well. So if you want to check those out, then head over to the show notes in the description. But thanks so much for joining us, Sarah, and you take care.
Anytime. Thanks so much. You as well.
Wow. Well, I hope you got as much value from that conversation as I did. I know I learnt a lot, and I'm going to be able to give my clients and my patients some fantastic strategies should they suffer from separation anxiety. So make sure you head over to those show notes and connect with Sarah. Check out her YouTube channel, check out her Instagram, and also her website too. She's got some fantastic information, and she does some great things on all of those channels. As always, head over to callthevet.org, which is where you'll find those show notes. It's also where you'll be able to submit your voicemail question for me to answer in subsequent episodes. So like I say, I'm going to be mixing up these interviews with answering your questions. And I'm also going to be bringing you audio that I'm doing maybe in my videos and other places, just so that you, as the podcast listener, gets value from all of the great information that I provide on all of my different channels. So I hope you'll join me next week. If you're not already subscribed, please consider hitting that subscribe button. And if you are subscribed and you know that this episode will help one of your pet owning friends and family, then please share it with them to help them help their pet suffering from this condition, and also help them live a healthier, happier life, which is what my mission is here on the Call the Vet show and on Our Pets Health. So until next episode, stay safe out there, stay well, and take care.
Thanks for listening to Call the Vet. For full show notes and any links mentioned in today's show, head over to callthevet.org, where you can also submit your question to be featured on an upcoming episode. We'll see you next time.